see everyone here today. This is the February edition of the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness Legislative Action Committee, and I'd like to welcome you. We're going to get started. There might be more people joining, but I want to honor everyone's time and thank you for being here. So we have a small but mighty group to start. I'm Lisa Chapman. I'm the Director of Public Policy at Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, or MICAH. MICAH serves as an inclusive voice to improve systems and support communities in a way that leaves no one behind. It's our mission statement. Today, we have an action-packed agenda. We have some fabulous guest speakers today who I'll introduce momentarily. Eric's going to run through some federal updates, and then I will segue over and do some state updates, and there's a lot going on, at least state-wise. We'll give you some MICAH updates and tell you what we've been up to, and then we want to hear about you and what you're involved in, what's going on in your community, and talk about some things that are happening around the state. So without any further ado, let us turn to our guest speakers today. So I am thrilled to introduce some colleagues, people that we've been working with for a long time. Essence Wilson, who is the Chief Strategy Officer, and Joel Arnold, who's the Planning and Advocacy Manager for an organization that many of you know and are familiar with, but they're called Communities First Incorporated, and they operate in, well, their headquarters is in Genesee County, but they also do work in Southeast Michigan, the Detroit area as well. So they're going to talk to us about an effort they're involved in Genesee County with an affordable housing and community development millage. So let me turn it over to them, and we're going to switch PowerPoints real quick. And welcome, Essence and Joel.
Yes, and I think we'll be able to share screen if that's been enabled for us. Thank you very much for having us. This has certainly been an effort that has been a labor of love, and for many good reasons. Just want to share a quick little bit of background information. So Communities First is one of the organizations that has been involved in this effort. Some of you may be familiar with us and with our work. We are a nonprofit located again in the Flint area, but also doing work across the state of Michigan. And our focus started out with providing affordable housing for low-income seniors. And then our next development was a permanent supportive housing development, as we were involved with the Flint Genesee County Continuum of Care, and really got deeply involved in issues that were affecting people experiencing homelessness, and wanted to use our knowledge and skills to, as a developer, to address those needs. Since then, we have developed, I think close to 500 units of safe, affordable housing. And we've been able to, through our efforts, to bring in investment to the communities that we serve of about $60 million. We serve about 35,000 people annually. And we do a lot of different programs. So we've got our Engaged Communities work, which this sort of falls under, where there's a need for advocacy. That's part of the reason that we're here, that we have a good relationship with MICAH, advocating for change. We work with CEDAM as well. And I also happen to be the chair at the present time of the Flint Genesee County COC. And so I am deeply ingrained with the data, the statistics, the needs, and just a couple of things as we're about to talk about this millage proposal that came to mind were really around getting more and more familiar with like the HUD-NOFO and ESG and the restrictions and requirements that actually are sometimes prohibitive from us developing community level solutions that address the needs that we have. So as we're advocating maybe for change for things like funding for supportive services and permanent supportive housing, we also have to be looking at what are the things that we might be able to affect change with, and how else might we get this done so that there can be unrestricted, dedicated dollars that allow us to be immediately responsive to a community need while we're waiting on longer term legislation to be enacted, which is also a need as well. So I have with us Joel Arnold, who's going to talk through some of the details of this proposed millage. It's not a foreign concept at all. There have been other communities who have been successful in getting this passed. And as he talks through, be thinking about any questions you might have. We're going to ask you to save those until the end. And then hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes for some dialogue and discussion as well. So with that, Joel, if you could go ahead and share about the proposed millage. Actually, you were already in slideshow mode. So there you go.
Thank you, everybody, again for your time this morning. So yeah, the idea here has really come out of our work at Communities First and trying to systemically address the issue of homelessness and affordable housing in our county. We've been doing this work now for 13 years. Like Essence said, we've built hundreds of units of affordable housing, but have really come to the point of recognizing that the current levels of funding available on a consistent basis and the amount of housing that we're able to build with local capacity just will not solve this problem. Just continuing to apply for low-income housing tax credit programs or special funds as they come up from MCAH, while very helpful and they keep progress going, just will not solve the issue of homelessness in the community. So that's where this issue came from. And as we were kind of developing this, we wanted to take a step back to see, is there actually need for this? And not just beyond our own subjective experience, but from an objective standpoint. So we know that in 2020, over 1,300 people in Genesee County experienced homelessness. And the county itself, as part of its regular action plans for federal funding, has to do an assessment on things, like rent burden and the number of homes needed. And right now, there's a shortage of almost 5,000 units of affordable housing just in Genesee County, 5,000 units, right? So we're not even one of the 3 or 4 biggest counties in the state of Michigan available to households with extremely low incomes. And we're constantly at Communities First doing work, but we're seeing in our county anywhere from in a given year maybe 100 new units of affordable housing getting built based on current market funding sources. So just functionally, it's just not going to be enough to tackle this problem. That I know, as we all know, right, one of the core social determinants of health, if not the foremost social determinant of health, is somewhere to live. And we've been excited to see other entities really take on the SDOH concept, and we think that this really lives into that in a reality. And then the last thing too is we've also been seeing in our community, and we've seen this mentioned in the state of Michigan across gubernatorial administrations, that the median age of skilled trades workers continues to rise with a limited ability to replace those workers, quickly leading to a risk that we might not actually even have the workforce to do the construction needed in our community to address the shortage of housing. So what we have been proposing here in Genesee County is a 0.98 mil 10-year countywide millage funding proposal focusing on a couple of holistic areas around economic development and quality housing. So the biggest chunk is what we're calling housing and community stability. And this is the piece that would go to support things like affordable housing development, targeted blight elimination near affordable housing sites, neighborhood stabilization work. A second piece around skilled trades training and skill development, so that as we are hopefully ramping up the amount of construction that we see in our community, we're also having a workforce that can actually build it. Because the last thing I think that we'd want to see is a lot of funding coming in for community for housing development, and then an exact same size workforce, which means project prices all just get raised anyway, and the money gets eaten up because the workforce can't meet the demand. A third thing that we had put in here, these are sort of smaller pieces, were small business supports and local community centers, so that as we're doing some of this development, we're doing it in a holistic way. Communities First, when we do housing developments, we try and make sure that we're including commercial space, that we're locating things near neighborhood serving businesses like pharmacies or grocery stores or medical offices or anything like that. And also, and we saw this as an opportunity to invest a small amount in local community centers, because I think, especially here in Flint, but really in communities across the state, that we've seen a big disinvestment in those kind of neighborhood anchors for a long time. And so this fund would raise about $10.9 million annually that would be received by the Genesee County Board of Commissioners, and was proposed to be dispersed through an MOU agreed upon by the county. And funds, and our recommendation, would be available to both entitlement partners and as open grants to qualifying organizations. So just as some examples, and some of you may already live in these communities that have done some of this before, we constantly try and tell folks that while we're trying to be innovative in Genesee County, the concept of a millage dedicated to affordable housing is not creative. It is something that other communities in the state have recognized is needed to actually make systemic change. So right, Washtenaw County, Kalamazoo County have done this, although in slightly different structures. Washtenaw County, I know, partnered with a large nonprofit housing developer. Kalamazoo County did a lot of partnership with their public housing authority. And then as we also talk about building out capacity, we've seen some great investments recently, especially from skilled trades unions. The carpenters and millwrights have completed a multi-million-dollar facility in Detroit to expand capacity and make their trades more accessible to a lot of communities that are often not represented in our trades unions. The operating engineers built out a large new facility in Howell. And when it came to small business supports, I think a lot of us have seen the success of Detroit's Motor City Match program, which does a lot of sort of gap financing for startups everywhere from, teaching people exactly how to manage a business and getting skill sets, all the way up to facade improvements or build outs of actual commercial space. So what we try to do is take what we see as things that are working in other communities, put it together in a holistic way, and give it a reliable funding stream, so that, if we're sitting here saying we know this is a housing problem today, we could say, okay, in 2028, we'll have this reliable stream of funding. We can, developers, whether it's us or other developers, can acquire property, can build out, budgets and things like that. So it's proposed right now that this millage would have 2 entitlement partners, essentially entities that on an annual basis are guaranteed to receive some dollar amount as determined by the Board of Commissioners. One would be Genesee County Habitat for Humanity. And they're, in Genesee County at least, really big at managing our homeowner rehab and repair programs to improve our existing housing stock, but also they do a lot of housing development and community stability programs. And then ourselves at Communities First to do those housing development and community stability programming, as well as the management and operations of some skilled trades training and skill development facilities. So allocations, of course, like any millage, may rise or fall over the life of the millage, but a portion of the funds would go to these 2 partners. So our proposed funding structure, and this is just a little bit more detail, is under that housing and community stability bucket would be housing development, homeowner rehab, and community stability efforts by experienced developers at both Communities First and Habitat. And the reason that these 2 entities were explicitly listed is because they're right now in Genesee County the only 2 nonprofit housing developers who do work countywide. We've had some folks who have done, one project here or one-off projects there, but these are the only 2 right now, at least, that exist on an annual basis doing work. But then there would also be a portion of the funds open to a competitive grant process for organizations undertaking housing development. So that would be available to other developers, community organizations who show that they have the ability to deliver on projects, but also may not be guaranteed recipients every year. Under that skilled trades training and skill development piece, we've talked about grants for skilled training and developments all through a competitive grant process, focusing on expanding access, particularly for women and people of color, who we know are very underrepresented in our trades, as well as funds to support multi-purpose skilled trades training facilities managed by CFI. We've been in great conversations with partners about how to best manage that. We do have a facility currently that we own that previously operated as a skilled trades training facility and was vacated about 3 or 4 years ago. That's still in good enough condition to operate this way. And then for small businesses, akin in many ways to Motor City Match, we'd love to see it as funded for competitive grants for small business supports. And then just a small piece, really, this 0.02 mils set aside to fund qualified community centers in low-income neighborhoods across the county. And so a conversation right now is that this grant process could be overseen by committees of community representatives, whether that's through the Communities First Foundation, which is a separate nonprofit grant making arm from Communities First, or through another structure set up agreed upon by the county. One thing that we really, keep hitting on in our conversation with folks is that we see this millage as a tangible fiscal commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion beyond, we've seen, I think, some really great work over the last several years of incorporating this into organizational structures and community conversations, but we see this as a real way to put our money where our mouth is. Because we know that, again, we're short 5,000 units of affordable housing, and that shortage falls disproportionately on women, people of color, and especially those in rural communities. A lot of times rural poverty and rural homelessness is often overlooked. We think this is a way to address that in a really profound way. In the city of Flint alone, the city's master plan has a goal to build a further 15,000 units of multifamily housing in the coming 11 years. And there is, again, as folks that do this development work every day, without some additional funding source, there is just no way that that's going to happen, given the existing dollar amounts that we see. And we know right now the state is uniquely flush with some surplus revenue that they are committing to housing, which we're very appreciative of. But again, that's one-time revenue, and this will be a way to address these things in a long run and sustainable way. And one thing that we're really excited about is that millages often go to a single entity, but we see this as a mix of entitlement partners and grant making as a way for a lot of community organizations to address challenges across the county. So these are just some last little statistics about the impact that we think will come out of this. We're confident of seeing an additional 200 units annually, an additional up to 70 homes repaired every year, supports for up to 750 more small businesses, and a lot of opportunities for technical support, business development training, but real systemic long-run changes that we know can make a difference. So I believe that's probably the end of our time on this, and are happy to answer any questions. But again, we appreciate you guys letting us take the time to talk with you here this morning.
Great, Joel and Essence. Thank you so much. Really exciting. I have one question that comes to mind, and I'll open it up for others too, but just what are you thinking in terms of, I know you're kind of working on a campaign and partners and educational, informational things. What's your timing look like?
So at this point, it's looking like the next time that this millage could appear on a ballot would be probably August of 2024. So the county has no otherwise scheduled county elections. So if we were to do it, but before then, we would essentially have to pay for an entire countywide election, which is not going to happen. So August of 2024, which means it would have to be voted on by the County Board of Commissioners at the latest in the early spring of 2024. But we would like to do that considerably before then.
Great. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts that they wanted to share? I know Amanda talked about, oh, go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, it's exciting. Thank you for the presentation, Joel and Essence. One of the things that we found in the city of Ann Arbor that would make the money go farther was looking at our city of Ann Arbor publicly owned properties. And so I was curious if you all have looked at kind of county owned properties, institutionally owned properties that could be kind of donated to the effort.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was
Well,
going to say
we have had right in Flint, we're in the unique situation akin to a lot of post-industrial cities where a lot of our city is publicly owned. I think the Genesee County Land Bank owns something like a third of all residential parcels in the city of Flint. And we have had conversations with and they've been, supportive of the effort so far. We've had conversations with their CEO, Michael Freeman, because I would totally agree that a partnership, especially between our county land bank, because their land ownership portfolio is just so massive. And this millage would make those dollars go a lot further.
Yeah, and I'll just add that it's something that we have certainly done it before. So we have acquired property from the land bank and redeveloped it into permanent supportive housing, actually. So I think there's a relationship there and a track record that would certainly allow us to continue to do that. And I just want to address Amy's comment. Thank you for acknowledging that. It is a huge issue, and it's something where, as we're doing more and more construction, we're noticing that it's harder and harder to get local contractors and local talent. So we felt as though it made sense, if we're going to build more, don't create a scenario where now we're importing contractors from, Detroit. We've had bids as far away as New York, right? That would actually bring their team here and set up shop because there aren't just enough qualified people in the trades, and construction and contractors need that support to kind of continue to grow and meet the requirements that they would need to meet in order to do projects of this scale. So certainly something that was on our radar, and again goes back to that kind of holistic, like, how can we make sure this is benefiting the entire community versus we're solving one problem but creating another huge issue.
Great, thank you. There's so many aspects to it, just that are, interwoven and all make sense. And especially, with the trades and the rising cost of a college education, which we know is not for everyone. My own son is a metal worker, so I appreciate that aspect of the effort. Any other questions from anyone or any thoughts? Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Wanted to thank you, Essence and Joel, for being here today. We had a chance to chat several months ago. I've lost track of how long ago it was. I appreciated the opportunity to have you guys fill me in on what you've got going on, and allowed me to provide you some feedback. I just want to congratulate you all on this project. I believe I said that back then as well, but this idea of a county-wide effort really could be a pilot here when we think in terms of what kind of success you may have with it. So I'm hoping that you learn some lessons along the way, that you're successful, and that others will be able to also look to what you've done to potentially take it to their own communities, because I do think the comments that you had on the front end about the reality is the funds are not there to do a lot of the things that we need to do unless we're taking the initiative to make sure that there are some resources that are earmarked specifically for the work that we think needs to be done. We're going to have ongoing challenges in perpetuity in most communities around the state. So really wanting to follow what you're doing. And as I told you when I met with you, if there are ways that we as an organization can be helpful, we certainly want to be able to do that. But there are a lot of partners here who can offer some input and ask questions along the way, and hope you stay in touch with us about it so that we can be a facilitator with respect to getting some input from others. I mean, you're fortunate here. You've got Amanda Carlisle, who just spoke, who has some experience with this, but other communities also, I think, have different lenses that they can bring in. And if we can help you to be successful, we certainly want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I did see, thank you, Eric. I did see Amanda reach out and Joel connect with you about her experience in the Ann Arbor campaign. And I know Oakland County had an effort around source of income protections and some other housing, and I'd be happy to connect you with some of the folks that worked on that if that would be helpful as well. So yeah, keep in touch, keep us posted, and thank you so much for your presentation today. Any other questions from anyone? All right, I don't know who's sharing that. There we go. Okay, Eric, would you like to go with our federal updates, please?
I can't follow that. They were too good, but I'll try. I'll suck it up and do what I can. So federal updates, I've got a smattering of things for you here. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of the fact that the House of Representatives does have a new speaker. You may have heard that rumor. It only took about a year and a half in voting. Actually, it was briefer than that, but it was a little contentious, as we all know. But then it set the stage for a package of rules to be developed because of the, I would say, awkward nature of and precarious nature of the speaker's role, that these House rules are a little bit limiting moving forward. I just wanted to identify some things just as a piece of background for you, because really what it's doing is it's foreshadowing the future, and it's telling us that there will be some potential funding fights that we need to be aware of and be engaged in the battle on. So we're looking at things falling along party lines is not too surprising, but not just appropriations bill, but also probably the more important issue, which is the country's debt limit. And we need to be thinking about how we can be a part of that conversation. There's a lot of information coming out yet about it. It's, discussions are close to the vest, if you will. But if there's any information that we have about how you can engage with your member of Congress or members of Congress, we will let you know that. But speaking about the rules, one of the rules will allow a single member of Congress to force a vote to oust the House Speaker, which is, it does put the House Speaker in a very precarious position. So he is going to be walking very carefully on eggshells, doesn't want to get somebody upset. So the kinds of proposals that he would be supporting are going to be narrower. It's going to be much more difficult, I think, to have anything from the other side of the aisle come forth because of a fear of losing job. Another provision includes significantly makes it more difficult to enact legislation to increase direct spending or increase revenues via tax increases. It blocks the House from considering legislation that would increase mandatory spending. So some spending that is mandatory through previous action that has been taken. An example of that is the SNAP funding. And then proposals to increase federal revenues through tax increases would require a super majority or 3/5 of the House members actually voting in favor of that. So that doesn't make it a much higher bar when you think in terms of trying to increase tax revenue. So it's going to be more challenging, and the package of rules tells us that very clearly. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. Thanks. So enough of that. I just wanted to give a quick update on some committee assignments that were made, and you can see on the Senate side that we have Debbie Stabenow, who is represented on the Finance Committee, and these are the committees that are more pertinent to housing issues. So I just wanted to give some highlights here. But Debbie Stabenow on the Finance Committee, and then House committees, Ways and Means is Dan Kildee again. Financial Services is Rashida Tlaib this year. Bill Heisinger returns to that role. And then in Appropriations, John Molinar actually is sitting on 3 different subcommittees. And the Republican members have been announced, and that's why I've represented them here. I have not been able to find out who the Democratic members are at this point, so I don't think that they have been determined and announced yet. So I'll keep you posted. But I'm saying this because if you have any of these folks who are representing your districts, your voice will be particularly helpful to us. So keep that in mind. We may be calling upon you with respect to some action that would be taken by some of these committees or subcommittees. Next slide, please. And I want to give you an update. You all, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm assuming you all get the same kind of information that I received in your inbox. But for those who haven't, the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule has been released through HUD. The intent is to help communities meet our nation's more than 5 decades old requirement to actively address systemic racism and segregation, which have often resulted from specific federal populations. So just as the background on that, we do have legislation that was put in place of the Fair Housing Act a long time ago. It refers to this. It didn't have any teeth to make sure that this was actually happening. So there was a rule that was issued by the Obama administration back in 2015, for those who are keeping track of that. And then when a new president came in, the Trump administration summarily suspended that. And so now basically we're going full circle here. I know there were some adjustments that have been made in the language on it, but for all intents and purposes, it's just restating what the Obama administration had recommended for HUD's rulemaking. So wanted to just make you aware of that. I'm going to be dropping a link in the chat box so that you can actually see a fact sheet on that and gives you a little bit of background on it. So want you to be aware of it and think in terms of how your communities may be able to engage in this process. Anybody that has to put together a consolidated plan, any entity that has to put together a consolidated plan is going to need to take this into account and have an equal, I'm trying to think what equality plan, I think is what it's called. And then that needs to be incorporated in the consolidated plan. So there will be an opportunity at various levels for you to be engaged in this process to make sure that you're a part of the reviews that are done and making sure that it speaks to the issues that we have seen with respect to the impact of the racism and segregation over the years. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another update for those who hadn't seen it, but the Biden administration has released information about an initiative called the House America and All Hands on Deck effort to address the nation's homelessness crisis. Say that fast 3 times, I dare you. And so this is really, in my estimation, I'm thinking of this in terms of the work that was being done with respect to ending veteran homelessness, where there was kind of that wraparound approach, and it was from top to bottom of trying to engage stakeholders in the process. And that's what's being attempted here, working with leaders at all levels, from the national level on down to the local level, trying to bring them into the discussions and to help leverage resources. Speaking of leveraging resources, thinking in terms of what dollars were being put forth through the American Rescue Plan and how can those dollars be pulled together in an effective way to address the crisis of homelessness. And important here, the language housing first approach. And that's something we've talked about at previous meetings, is under attack in many areas. So this is just reaffirming the importance of the housing first approach. And I will drop a link in so that you can take a look at that report as well. It has more information about that initiative. Biden administration also has put forth a blueprint for a renter's bill of rights. Again, I'll drop some information in the chat box for you so that you can take a look at it. But just some highlights here of some of the things that I think are important because it's focusing on protecting renters and also promoting rental affordability for folks. And that's something that I think we can all identify with. Doesn't matter what community you're in the state. But the Federal Housing and Finance Agency will examine proposed renter protections and anti-rent gouging measures for new federally backed mortgages. It will also, the administration will hold quarterly meetings with renters and advocates to continue the conversation on renter protection. So it's really trying to open up that engagement and think in terms of those people who are directly impacted by some of the things that are prohibiting people from being able to access housing and or to protect them once they do have housing. Next slide, please. Federal Trade Commission and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau are going to get involved. They're going to collect information to identify unfair practices that prevent tenants from accessing or staying in housing. And I think that's really important because it's also then looking at enforcement actions. If those things are detected, trying to have some teeth to make sure that those things are addressed directly whenever possible. Those two organizations are also going to look at enforcement to ensure accurate credit reporting, which I know that is one of those things that we hear quite often, that someone has something on their credit report and it may not be accurate or it's outdated and people have problems trying to get over that hurdle. This should be addressing some of that proactively. And then HUD is going to publish a notice of proposed rulemaking to implement the 30-day notice requirement enacted by Congress through the CARES Act of 2020. So again, I'll have some more information for you, but I just wanted to make sure you knew there were some of those things that are happening that are coming through, at the federal level to address some of the issues that we're seeing at the local level. And some of those things that we normally don't talk about as much because we don't think we can have an impact on. It's good to see that action taking place at the federal level. The National Low Income Housing Coalition has put forth its policy priorities for the 118th Congress. And I just wanted to highlight a few things because it's consistent with a lot of the priorities that we've talked about over the last several years when we think in terms of appropriating funding. But it also lines up with some of the things that we as an organization, through MCAH are focusing on. So I wanted to just highlight those. So focus in 4 areas here if you want to, break it down into 4 pillars: bridging the gap between incomes and housing costs, expanding and preserving the supply of affordable, accessible rental housing for people with the lowest incomes. Again, that's targeting those who are most adversely affected by the limited housing supply. Providing emergency rental assistance to help stabilize families in crisis. And I think we're all on board with that and understand it and been advocating that forever. And then strengthening and enforcing robust renter protections. And that's a new area, I would say, and that's something that Lisa is going to be talking a little bit more about. And she's been talking about that through the work that she's been doing through this organization and would like to see you get involved in as well. So that's consistent, again, with what our priorities are going forward. Next slide, please. And of course, I want to have a call to action for all of you. So just as a reminder, there are a lot of ways that you can get involved. I don't have anything specific relating to any pieces of legislation or appropriations, et cetera. But in general terms, wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to be engaged. If you go to the National Low Income Housing Coalition's Action Center, and a link is there, and I'll drop that into the chat box to make it easier for you so you don't have to key it in again. There are a number of ways as an individual you can be involved, and there you can see 6 different categories there. But there are also sign-on letters for organizations. If you go to that website, you can get more information about each of those 6 individual categories, but also there's a section that has, I think, 4 different areas where there are some sign-on letters for organizations. So you as an individual or your agency can get involved. If you haven't already signed on to some of those sign-on letters, this is an opportunity to do that. So again, putting this out there, reminding you, squeaky wheel gets the grease. We need to be even more vigilant and vocal now that there is a split Congress, and I would urge you all to get engaged that way. Any questions now that I've gone through everything so fast you can't even remember what your question was on the previous slides that I had covered? I will take that to mean you thought I was extremely thorough or extremely boring and you fell asleep. You can always reach out to us if you have other questions. Feel free to drop it into the chat, but I will be making sure that we have some links to some of these materials that are referenced already.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. And while you were talking, I put a link in for the National Low Income Housing Coalition, our wonderful partner at the national level, who was holding a policy forum in March. And I think got the dates wrong. It's the March 22nd and 23rd. They're going to have a Hill Day. We will participate there along with CDM and many other partners, but wanted to make sure that you knew that.
And there are some scholarships available for people with lived experience. So if that's something you're interested in, I had seen something not that long ago that they had still had that open for anybody that wanted to apply.
Oh, I might have the wrong date. Wait a minute. We'll get the
Yeah,
right.
I think it's the week before.
Yeah.
I'll look real quickly.
Here it is. I found it. So yeah, we would highly recommend. It's going to be a wonderful event. They have a lot of really high-powered speakers. They always get the best, legislators and Matthew Desmond is going to be there. It'll be a wonderful event. So there's the corrected link. My apologies. Okay, next slide. Let's turn our attention and talk about some of the things that are going on at the state level. And I have to say, you basically have to run to keep up because there's been so much And it's very exciting. So I'll try my best to update you. I have some things that even happened more recently that aren't even on the slides. So one of the great things is that there are housing committees in both the House and the Senate now. The Senate has a permanent housing committee. In the House, it is a subcommittee. But so it just highlights the importance and elevates the importance of housing to our legislature. So we're really excited about that. The governor signed some bills at the state level. There's a link that we can put in the chat as well. SB 7, which was made a record for the first bill signed, I think, in 47 years. That quickly in the term. It was a $1 billion supplemental bill that also included some housing resources. So it included $75 million to demolish vacant buildings. It included $50 million for, it says affordable housing for the missing middle program, and some money for the Housing and Community Development Fund. You also need to know that they're working on a sustainable source for the Housing and Community Development Fund that we've been talking about for a couple of years. So that's exciting that there are some conversations going on, because there's so much additional funding that Michigan has available. So wanted to let you know that we are working fast and furious on tenant protections. Source of income protections, actually 2 bills were dropped last week. On the first by Representative Jason Morgan. They were the 2 bills in the House that were submitted last year that didn't make it to committee and to the floor. So they submitted the same language, the same bills. We are working to collaborate with them, because we have our Coalition for Expanding Housing Access. Many of you who are on the committee or on the coalition are on the call today, and we really are working toward a single path, which was we wanted the bill to amend the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, because there's more protections and more enforcement and more sanctions if it gets violated by having source of income as a protected class. So we're going to be working with the representative and also many colleagues. I spoke this morning with Representative Carter to kind of revise the language a little bit and maybe focus the path. So more to come on that from us as the weeks and months go on. We also are hoping, and we've had some conversation on just cause legislation with Senator Chang, and she's kind of making the rounds and talking with a lot of advocates and a lot of legal aid folks to try and get the language right and really tweak what we want to do to make it very a pointed bill. So that has not been dropped yet, but we're working on that as well. And just some of the other potential rental caps. Representative Carter's, one of her staffers, talked about not rent control, but rent stabilization. So, limiting the amount of rent that can be increased from year to year, as well as looking at some of the rent fees that we've been seeing, both application fees, convenience fees. We've also heard, thank you, Amanda, about a wait list fee that a landlord was imposing. So just know, please, if you hear about things like that, please let us know. And we are talking to our legislative partners to try and put something together to, regulate some of these fees. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to let you know that we are hosting our 7th annual Homelessness Advocacy Day at the Capitol. It is Wednesday, March 15th it is in person this year. We are holding it at the Michigan Municipal League offices, which are really great in terms of their location. It's right across the street from the Capitol. So we'll be there, and you can go to the next slide. I think I have our guest speaker on the next slide. Yes. So we're really thrilled to host our guest speaker, Senator Sam Singh, who will be with us. He is going to join us for about 20 minutes in the morning to greet us and talk about what advocacy means on both sides. He's been an executive director of a nonprofit. He's been a legislator, both in the House and now in the Senate. And so he's going to talk about advocacy and just some insights into what he's thinking. So if you come, please come on time, because he's going to be at the podium at 9:20. And so we'll all be caffeinating and hearing some great comments from him. So you can sign up. Amy's putting things in the chat. As part of our advocacy day and just advocacy efforts in general, we are putting together an advocacy video, and we've had some great partners, some advocates from around the state. This is the filming that I did last week. We're working with Uno Deuce, who's a wonderful multimedia company. So they've interviewed a couple of us, some people with lived experience, and some advocates around the state. And we will be showing this video there. And then, of course, it will be available on our website. Next slide, please. And here, thanks to many of you who weighed in and had conversations with us either last month or in December. This is a preview of the final version of MICA's policy priorities, and this is kind of a summary document. We're looking at 4 areas really to increase access to affordable housing. We know that's a huge need in Michigan. I think we're more than 200,000 units behind and, losing ground. So we really need to place a priority on increasing the supply and funding, supporting housing first efforts, as well as enacting tenant protections. We want to reduce barriers for people to get into housing. So preserving and expanding income supports to allow them to afford housing and pay rent, as well as different reforms, including criminal justice reform, to enable folks that are returning citizens or coming out of other settings to access housing. And then reducing racial disparities, both reducing housing discrimination for people of color, people that are immigrants here, people with disabilities, as well as supporting the legislation that would enact an impact analysis that would focus on the social determinants of health, as well as racial aspects before any legislation is enacted. Once it gets proposed, it will go through this kind of analysis. So we are in support of that as well. And then just other supports in terms of funding for sheltering people, interim housing, as well as improving the shelters that we have, expanding those settings, and increased mental health supports we heard is a big need around the state. So those are our policy priorities. We'll be sharing a lot more information in advance of our advocacy day and on our website. Amy Stevenson, our communications manager, has been doing a lot of work to really update and spruce up our website, and it looks fabulous. So thank you, Amy. Next slide. So how can you weigh in and how can your voice be heard? So you can join us in the advocacy day. We would love for you to sign up, as well as attending our advocacy monthly meeting. We have an advocacy champion nomination form for our Breakfast of Champions. So we really would love for you to nominate somebody. It could be a legislator, it could be somebody in a local community who's really doing a fabulous job in doing advocacy and making their voice and the community needs known. There's a registration link. We will send out these slides right after the meeting, so you can have that if you want to register for our Advocacy Day, or if you get our newsletter, you've certainly been getting that as well. So I think we have about 44 people signed up, so we're really excited, and we're looking forward to having people go out in teams. We are setting up those legislative appointments with the House and the Senate. Next slide, please. One other quick update. I just wanted to have 2 more minutes. Just some things that didn't make my slides that have been happening really since Friday at the state level. Some of you heard about the expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit, or as the governor is called, the Working Families Tax Credit. That was being approved right now and will be not only eligible in 23, but also for people that file their taxes, you know, right now for the 2022 year. So it would mean about $3,000 in a refund for a low-income family, working family. So we're really supporting that for people to get, you know, additional income, and that would really help people that are in the lowest income strata. As well, just happened, I think today, that a state tax cut was approved. It's going to be about $180 per income tax filer. So that's really great. And there'll be inflation relief checks that will be mailed out to people. So that's super exciting. And then a repeal of taxes for people who are on retirement income. So most people will qualify who are retired. And that's really exciting. And then lastly, I know you've probably heard about this. I think it's being finalized that the Michigan primary is now been changed. We are 5th in the nation in terms of the primary, and our primary will be February 27th, 2024, which is super early. Then normally it's in August. The governor signed the bill, but the bill can only go into effect 90 days after the legislature adjourns for the year. So this coming year, it will have to be in November, on November 29th, 2023, instead of the usual December. So they will really have to work to get that done so our primary can happen in February. So that's pretty exciting. That's hot off the press. So now we'd like to hear from you. Angana, you have your hand up.
Oh, just keeping it in everyone's sights, the Right to Counsel in Detroit pilot. It's still very underfunded, and I apologize for not having the link on hand for this meeting. There was an excellent article about it. So if I could send it to you, Lisa, I will.
Sure.
The people on the team are phenomenal, and you gave me an idea for nominating someone. So thanks for mentioning that, and I will. But I just wanted to keep it in everyone's sights because really we want it to become statewide, and many cities have tried it. It really, it's the one thing that really reduces evictions, and it also helps people see when you're advocating that evictions are violence. They're not an economic blip.
Absolutely, and there's such a broad coalition in Detroit, and I know they're working toward getting more funding in place to enact it, because it really calls for a lot of legal aid. And so, you know, they would love to have anybody who's available help join them or help fund them, or you know, work with them. They've got a lot of great tenant organizations. So yeah, great. The article calls the overlords to the mat. Yeah, get that link to me, Agana. I know we've had Tanya Myers-Phillips here several months ago to talk about it, and I know they're pushing forward and still working to get that fully implemented. So thank you. What other updates do folks have? What else is going on around your community? And I see Amy's posted the nomination form for advocacy. champion for our Breakfast of Champions, which is June 22nd, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. All right, well, if anyone wants to put anything in chat, if there's anything going on, if not, we'll go on to our next couple slides. We have a few more updates on training. And yes, feel free to, oh yes, thank you, Amanda. Michigan Balance of State got us the HUD Special NOFO award for unsheltered and rural homelessness. So yes, thank you for that. They did get, I think there was about 5 different entities within the Balance of State, with the Balance of State being COC being one of them. But yeah, a wonderful opportunity for them to do more work on unsheltered homelessness in rural Michigan. Thank you. Next slide. Yep, so you can feel free to follow our blog. Amy is great about updating it. We've posted some things recently on the federal strategic plan and response to homelessness in Detroit. There was an article by a columnist about a month ago. So we weigh in from time to time. We have some training coming up. So on Monday, a week from today, February 13th, we have staff retention and quiet quitting. So we will put the link in to register for that, but that's really going to be an interesting session. Next slide. Oh, yes, Eric and I are doing a webinar on Friday at 11 o'clock, talking about how you can do advocacy around the statewide Campaign to End Homelessness data report, and how you can use this and also some local data to advocate in your community for some of the things that you need. So thank you for that reminder. We'd love to see you join us on Friday. Next slide. I know there's one more. Monday, March 6th. I think this is our next date for Legislative Action Committee, and you will get a follow-up email today for some of the links if you didn't catch them. I think there's
Lisa,
also, go
could I
ahead.
jump in on that last
Yes.
slide? Thank you. I just wanted to jump in. I'm Amy. I've been putting a lot of links in the chat in addition to Eric. But I know I personally hate the chat. I can't listen and click things and do things at the same time. So if that works for you, that's great. But I will send a PDF out of all these slides with the links embedded in the slides so that you can go through of what's of interest to you and click on what you need to take action. There'll also be a video of the meeting. If a colleague couldn't attend, you want to share it, you can forward that email to them. So we will make sure that you get that in about the next 2 business days so that you don't have to try to listen and get the links at the same time. Anything that's in turquoise in the PDF means it's a link and you can just click on it. So thanks.
Thanks, Amy. All right, next slide. So we'd love for you to join us as a member. We are a membership organization, and that's some of the wonderful part about it is we can say to legislators we are working with, we have blank members. We have members that cover every corner of Michigan, and it's really helpful, and there's a lot of member benefits to joining MICA, as well as supporting our advocacy work, which we really appreciate. And you can follow us. We're pretty active on social media, thanks to Amy. And a lot of kind of behind the scenes and interesting things about what we're doing. You also get free attendance to the Breakfast of Champions if you're a member of MICA. There'll be some goodies as well. Thank you, Allison. I knew there was another training. It is the landlord and tenant rights and responsibilities, which is a fabulous training. So you can forward it to any tenants that you have, any landlords, any organizations within your community, so we highly recommend it. I think I've covered everything in the chat. Anybody have anything else? It is March 10th at 10 a.m. Thank you, Allison. It's rescheduled from December. Anyone else? Any announcements from anyone? If not, I will thank you for your participation and your brilliance and your advocacy as always. We hope you sign up to advocate with us at the Capitol on March 15th. Eric, final thoughts?
Just want to say thank you. A lot of information in this meeting. Thanks for paying attention to it all. Thanks again to our guests for being here today and speaking to you, and congratulations on the work that they're doing. But keep up the hard work, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Joel and Essence. See you next month.
Absolutely. Because I certainly, a lot of this, I would like to make sure that folks have a lot of this is very situational dependent, and we are here to assist. And I really encourage folks who have folks who are stalking, sexual assault, or human trafficking, or as an Indigenous survivor, consider sending a fact pattern to your second. We ask you not to give us our email out to clients yet because reasons. But if you send your email, your client case to slc@mcdsv.org, that's anything but domestic violence, we will, especially if it's a housing matter, particularly if you're in the metro area, but even if you're across the state, please send your fact pattern, and we'll be able to see if it's something we can legally assist you with as well. All right, friends, I'm gonna let it be quiet for a second, see if Kristen has anything.
I am just looking through the answer or the questions here to make sure we didn't miss anything. If we missed your question, please unmute yourself and let us know.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone. Particularly thank you, Kristen, for joining us. Kristen's extraordinary, and if you happen to live in the Thumb area, you're lucky, and we're excited to be able to work with her. And please feel free to contact me. I'm the executive director of the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, and I look forward to working with all of you as we move forward to help all folks who are experiencing homelessness.
And thank you also on behalf of Micah. I will, not only to the participants here, but once we do some editing, this training will be out on our YouTube channel as well for other folks to view if they couldn't join us today. And just once again, I want to thank you for your tenacity and patience as we work through the communication piece for a group this size. So thank you to our speakers and the participants. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you for your time.